if it takes 30 days for someone to take action after being exposed to the media, and then it takes maybe another 30 days, we'll just say it, to account for those sales, we're looking at a 60-day window of the return on our media investment. So trying to fill those gaps in with, say, the store traffic piece, with understanding how people are visiting, when they're visiting, how long it's taking to visit, helps us then to continue to refine that model, the analysis we're doing, to really understand, and that's where it becomes now we can give to leadership an expectation that's a little bit more grounded in the data that we do have, and then constantly trying to iterate and get more realistic, whether it's market testing, where we'll do a market with media on or a different media mix than another, and start to look at ways that we can pull those levers to just really decrease that timeline.
I think this is one of the most interesting topics that I've had on the podcast, because we're going to go beyond just talking about marketing campaigns, and I'm going to learn a lot about myopia. Pediatric myopia is surging, and EssilorLuxottica, a brand you probably do know, and I'm going to ask Matt to tell you why you know this brand, has a bit of a first mover advantage here. And as in all things that we talk about on marketing rounds, marketing is complex. It's not super easy sometimes to stitch together this funnel and this strategy. And Matt's success depends on driving patients into independent practices and proving the impact, but all facing imperfect attribution. My guest is Matt Jackson, who's the Director of Americas of Consumer Media and Digital at EssilorLuxottica. Matt, thanks for joining me on Marketing Rounds.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ray. It's really good. I like watching the series, and so it's fun to be on it.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you on. Like, I met you in person at one of our house call events for the first time. I guess we're talking 9 months ago now, and just have always really appreciated the complexity of the things you try to do. And I think that's really relevant to our audience, because healthcare is way more complex than selling a pair of shoes or buying a t-shirt from a consumer experience. But we do need to figure out, how do we get that attribution, and how do we drive the impact and prove it. EssilorLuxottica, like when I actually knew the brand, but like when I've talked to people about it, they're like, "What's EssilorLuxottica?" I'm like, this brand. Yeah. Tell people why they should know the brand EssilorLuxottica.
Yeah, of course. It's one of those brands, those companies that the biggest companies you've never heard of kind of things.
Yeah.
A lot of times people ask, and I say EssilorLuxottica, and they say, "I'm sorry, what was that?" It sounds, bless you. Sometimes, but it's a worldwide manufacturer and distributor of all things eye care. We span across retail with brands like Lens Crafters and Pearl Vision and Sunglass Hut, through all of the major players, some of the most premium and powerful brands in eyewear and fashion, like Ray-Ban and Oakley and Oliver Peoples and Versace, and the list goes on and on. Where I sit is actually over on the more medical side within our eyeglass lenses brands. So these are generally prescription lens products, brands for progressive lenses, single vision lenses, obviously now lenses to work on the condition of myopia, which, as you mentioned, Ray, is becoming quite the pandemic in our country and across the world. But we have many other organizations and businesses within our umbrella, but it's quite a massive organization. But we are all a part of an organization that is bringing a better quality of life to individuals through their vision. So much of what we consume, whether it's fun media, whether it's movies, TV, whether it's sports, just your day-to-day life, getting around. So much of that is involved with your eyes and how you see the world. And so making certain that people have access to the care they need, to the technology, to the latest innovations in these products is core to our belief system. So it's something that I even personally feel very strongly about, having worn glasses or contact lenses for too many years to even count. I don't want to mention it here because then people will think I'm older than I look, but Yeah, it's quite a big place, but it's really an exciting opportunity for us to bring something that is relatively unknown to the consumer, and it presents a challenge on a daily basis to do this to categories that maybe are so low awareness that you're basically building a category while you're also trying to build a brand that presents a new kind of challenge that's not just a pair of sneakers or a
Yeah.
t-shirt, as you mentioned, right?
My wife is a pediatric nurse at UCSF in San Francisco. And so at the dinner table, I don't know anything. She knows everything. And I feel like this is my one opportunity to have dinner tonight where I can educate her on pediatric myopia. Why is there a surge here? Like what's going on?
There are a number of reasons. Some of it is behavioral. There's some of it's just um, a little bit more observation and understanding that children that had suffered through this, maybe went untreated for so long, like many conditions that seem to be surging nowadays. Sometimes it was there. It was just never really known. But the condition of myopia, and I'll try to be super simple on this one for sure, but essentially it is the way that your eye develops as you're growing. And everyone knows your eyeball in your mind, you see it, you go, oh, it's just a little like a basketball. Well, when myopia affects a child as they're developing, the eye doesn't necessarily grow in a spherical shape like it's supposed to. It's more football shaped a little bit.
Hmm.
And some of that has to do with genetics. There's a good portion of it that has to do with genetics. Some of it's behavioral, where near focus behaviors like reading and coloring and being inside all day and not using your distance vision kind of conditions your eye to not quite grow and adapt to the way it needs to. So when that happens, for anyone that knows about optics and the way the eye works, the light of everything you see is light coming in. It focuses the lens of your eye, focuses that light on the back of your eye, on your retina. Well, if your eye is a little bit odd shaped, it's not going to focus in the right position. And so it's not going to hit the retina the way it needs to be in sharp, clear focus. And so everything's going to be a bit fuzzy for the person. So, this comes on pretty early in many kids. And so as they develop, they start to experience these symptoms of, maybe not being able to see the board in school or the teacher presenting in class. They can't see it as well. And for an individual, they tend to think it's just how everyone sees. They don't necessarily know, right? Because they're a
Yeah.
child. They can't express that they have something different going on. So this condition of myopia and the fact that the rates are increasing is something that from an awareness standpoint, from just an overall education standpoint, is a big challenge to address, step one. And so
Yeah.
obviously the industry, the ophthalmologists and opticians and optometrists that are across the country are, always aware when they have a visit from a child to explore this as an issue for them potentially. But again, there's just, if a child hasn't brought it to the attention of their parent, they're not going to walk into the eye doctor on their own. It takes observance from a parent's perspective. You have pediatric nurses and pediatricians across the country that are also during routine visits. They're asking certain questions and calling this out and exploring it for the child. Even school nurses are teachers in elementary school level are pretty critical to this kind of movement of making certain that there's just a consideration for kids and how they use their vision, because it will present itself in things like bad grades or poor performance in school, and cutting up in class is maybe because they can't focus on the content, so they're just trying to find other avenues to do things. So that's the type of messaging and the type of communication we're trying to get out to parents across the country to make sure that they're considerate of the child's vision, and then they need to know from there, what do I do about it? Right? What's my next steps? Myopia is again, I go back to just this idea of us making sure that we're, as a company, as an organization, and as our brands, we're speaking to people in a way that they know that there's an opportunity for them to live their best life by using our products and taking care of these needs.
What's the name of the brand within EssilorLuxottica?
It is called Stellest, and it is the first and only of its kind, the spectacle lens that goes in a pair of eyeglasses that treats this condition of myopia. It slows the progression of myopia in children so that they can, not end up through their growing years getting worse and worse and worse to where when they become an adult, now they just have incredibly poor vision, and it leads to many other complications and problems, later in life. So Stellest lenses, they just were FDA market authorized for us to use in the US back in late September, October, and it became available. And we've seen a lot of passion from the optometrists and the optical community across the country, which has been phenomenal to hear. So now it's on to the consumer, onto the potential patient, to make sure that they have the awareness and the visibility here that they can make those right informed decisions for their kids.
This is one of the things I love most about my 4 years at Fresh Pain, is that marketing in healthcare really, really matters. Like you have an opportunity to change. A lot of people like us later on in life will look back and be like thankful for this brand because it changes their outcome and changes the shape of their life. Shifting a little bit to the marketing lens, like it's a business, and EssilorLuxottica also wants to take advantage of this first mover advantage and make sure that you create awareness and traction in the market. How was the launch from a marketing perspective? How was the launch of Stellest framed internally?
Well, so when the authorization came through, obviously prior to that, we had been prepping for a number of years, knowing that this innovation was right on the horizon. Laying the groundwork through the community of eye doctors across the country to have, myopia kind of practice procedures and protocols in their office. And these things have been years in the making. Once this brand became available to us, there was, of course, a decision on how rapidly do we try to expand into the consumer space. But also, we're needing to make sure that the distribution is available in the market. We have thousands of independent eye care practices across the country. These are all independent businesses. They have their own structure, their own needs, their own ways of doing things. They're all, not all of them, but so many of them are our customers. They purchase our other prescription lens products through us. So making sure that groundwork was in place, that technical setups in the background for processing orders electronically from the individual location to one of our processing labs, routing the jobs, all of those things had to be, in place, before we really started pushing consumers to the doors. So there was a lot of discussion between how rapidly we try to take advantage of this first position, knowing that, obviously there are competitors across the world that would be ready to move right in. So, but balancing that with this distribution angle and the sort of B2B marketing to get this product in place. If it's such a bad experience if we actually activate a consumer who's totally interested and ready to go, and they enter a door that doesn't have the product, it's not ideal. So we did a lot of the B2B work during that first couple of months. We were talking, the medical affairs team and our marketing teams did amazing jobs. Our entire account executive organization was on the ground, visiting doctors, having meetings, explaining the product, giving them every bit of information they could in order to prepare them, so that then I can come in and do the work that my team does and really get those consumers excited about it, get them to understand it, and as rapidly as possible start to get them in that decision path. This is was a big effort. So that first few months, the consumer piece, the consumer marketing angle was very targeted to markets that we knew had, early adoption of the category in the practices, markets that we knew had also an overlay of the population base that is in the need for this brand. And so we did some very targeted things through late Q4 last year after the product was available to sort of get the markets ready there, but also maintain a bit of balance between the distribution and the consumer activation. And then flipping to this year, the goal is the success measures are very lofty, and so we had to really hit the ground as fast as we could and get things activated, and just start to drive that demand. And that's been the biggest challenge I've ever dealt with in this space over the years, is really driving that demand rapidly for something that is so just phenomenally unknown to a consumer, to your average person, your average parent. It's the hardest hill to climb I think I've ever seen.
A lot of what I've talked about is like a lot of healthcare is really a lot of spend is tied up in intent channels, which are really like practical for many things.
Mm-hmm.
But what you just described is like something brand new, and demand gen is the thing that needs to be like you. That's the weapon you need in order to be successful. I know you mentioned to me, even in House Call Miami when we were in person together, the ambitious goals, like very lofty goals
Mm-hmm.
to achieve as a business. And I know you shared with me how that's very daunting, especially given some of the structural constraints around your ability to connect the dots. I would love it if you maybe you mentioned one of them,
Sure.
which is like, you don't fulfill, it's being fulfilled through some independent.
Correct.
I've been to some of these places for sure. Walk me through a little bit about that ambition tied to structural constraints, and like what are some of the challenges that you're having to navigate?
Yeah. So many of the healthcare brands that I know you guys work with and that are out there, from a marketing perspective, if I'm selling a product through an e-commerce platform, if I'm a wellness company and I sell a vitamin, something like this, right? I have that direct to consumer pathway. I know who's adding things to a cart. I know who's placing the order. If they didn't place the order, I can absolutely email them, text them, put them in a retargeting campaign in social. I can do all
Yep.
of those things. When you're in this actual, medical space, obviously, even if you're trying to bring them to your own hospital network, you still have all of these limitations. And then you take that the step further, like many pharmaceutical brands and things, where I don't actually own any of the practices. These are independent eye care providers. I'm a seller to them. I'm a vendor in that sense. And so, to really get visibility into the consumers that we're activating and building intent, but once I hand that consumer off and they become a patient of Dr. Tim, that's invisible to me. I have zero visibility into what's happening there, from an exam standpoint, from a transaction standpoint. I have nothing, and so that's just monumentous. Of I can show all of the brand lift I want. I can show all of the media metrics that make me happy, but at the end of the day, it's hard to find the visibility to even determine if those media metrics that we know work in a CPG space or in a retail space, are they working in this space as well? It's just the the game that you have to play, and then you couple that with the fact that the decision cycle in a lot of healthcare decisions is quite long. It takes a lot of effort to get someone off the couch and to go do the thing that you want them to do, because it's just not easy. Booking an appointment, not super easy. Finding time in the calendar, taking off work, wait for the kid to be out of school if this is the case here. So those decision cycles take a long time. And it's not just going and grabbing something off the shelf because it's piqued your interest, or adding it to your cart. It's a very different life cycle here. Repurchase cycles are also very long. In our space, think about yourself. How often do you even visit the eye doctor? Do you go once a year, like you're supposed to? I mean, I do.
Almost never.
Yeah. So that's take one, is everyone needs to go get their eyes done right now. And then, step two is in general, you don't necessarily have prescription change often enough, or for whatever reason, they're not purchasing even a pair of glasses at every visit. It's maybe every 2 years that they're repurchasing. And so that kind of cycle of revenue versus the advertising functions and the investments that we're spending in media to get that to pay off becomes such a long tail approach that oftentimes the business has the pressure of needing those results today. And so you couple those different pieces together and proving out something that from a media, on paper, the media plan, the media performance, everything is just firing like it's supposed to be. But then maybe on the other end, you're going, well, why aren't we seeing the massive return on sales at the same time that we would expect in a different sort of scenario or different environment? That's the crux of it. That's the pressure on a daily basis, is to try to piece those things together, because we believe very strongly in the media plan that we've built, the way we're going about it, the way we're activating consumers. It's just really making certain that we're connecting the dots to the sales results at the end of the day, and to the jobs process through the labs, how rapidly they're coming in. Are we gaining new patients into the mix, or are we just talking to the same patients again? Getting those pieces together is the biggest effort in the day. Putting together a cool media plan, we're pretty good at that, but really digging in and connecting the dots, that's the tough part.
I mean, to all of our friends who are in consumer marketing, whether you're in healthcare or not, like if you can draw a direct line to, sign up for this subscription or sign up for this blood panel, it's hard as it is, but like imagine if you can't even see the finish line. And that's exactly what Matt's talking about in that context, because I mean, you and I have geeked out on this before, is like, it doesn't really matter. You're still going to have to figure out, even if it's imperfect, some way to create attribution. What are some of the key things? What are some of the key metrics that you are leveraging with your team to try to get you that signal that you need, so that you can kind of continue to reinforce the leadership and to yourselves that this strategy is having the impact you desire?
Since we don't have that, kind of true conversion data, we don't have that information on the point of sale. What we do are try to find little checkpoints along the way. Everybody calls them lead indicators, lag indicators, signals, intent signals, whatever. So, from a media standpoint, we do all the normal kind of brand lift studies and these kind of things, just to keep a pulse check on how the creative is performing, how the activations are performing, that we are getting that, that view from the consumer standpoint, that they are really, at least absorbing that the ad unit was available. They know they've seen it, which is great. From there, we go down even further. We drive the traffic directly through our Essilor.com site, which has information about our brands, but also a store locator, a location list of the eye care practices across the country that are distributors of our brands. So we monitor that, all the traffic flow through the site, where it's coming from, what's pulling it there, what the users are doing, visiting the locator, putting in their zip code, or using the location services to find a list of practices near them. And then, of course, there are actions that they can take from there. There's a phone number button, right? Click to call, right? They phone the practice and try to book an exam. There's a book now button. So if they want to book an appointment online, many practices have this service available. In our case, we don't own the booking solution. So they click the button and then it takes them off site to whatever the practice's booking platform is. So again, right there, the visibility is cut off. So that's as far down the funnel from a clicks standpoint as I can get, is down to the website where someone has performed a search and engaged with some of these actions they can do. Of course, every bit of that we use when it's obviously consented, to make sure that we are super privacy focused in that case even. But everything that we can use there to build lookalikes, to build retargeting, to build any of the traditional sort of media vehicles that we have for optimization, we absolutely leverage. Now, after that, because I don't know where anybody's going, historically we built a bunch of models. We've done some plenty of analysis. We're always analyzing stuff in order to try to really suss out how many of those clicks does it take to get to the end game. And so we're kind of constantly looking at those correlations between the actions that we perceive as the indicator of success, and then ultimately what the success is. But like I mentioned, those windows can be pretty long. But we've partnered with a number of different services platforms out there. Foot traffic analysis is one that we find incredibly valuable, because we can then, have it measured and modeled against all of the locations that we are supporting, at whether it's the kind of company wide, right, from my brands, any of the practices that sell our products, or the subsets that sell, say, Stellest, right? In this case, we can then overlay that foot traffic data with the other signals that we have and look at how many of the practices were visited during that period by consumers that are in the panel on these services, but also look at incremental lift. Visit lift is massive, because you're not going to be able to get this product if you don't go to the eye doctor.
Yep.
And so the visit lift and incrementality there is really huge, because that's an indicator that people are taking action as a result of our media presence. And then we can, that's obviously lift compared to if people would have just gone to the eye doctor without anything. Right now we're still relatively early days. It's only been a few months since the media has started, and it's definitely on a trajectory to continue to ramp up as the business continues to ramp up behind it, right? And the distribution. So already seeing significant lift moving up into the upper single digits and into the double digits of traffic driving lift and visit rate lift to our locations. So, those are the kind of things that are great signals for us. But then even still, they visited. We don't necessarily know if the person needed the glasses that day. I'm glad they went. We all should. Check two. The second thing, though, is even if they did need them and they placed their order that day at the doctor, well, there's still that whole kind of routing process and then getting the job back, which takes, a week or two, depending on the prescription and other circumstances. So by the time we start to account for that sales data, now we're a few weeks down the road.
Yeah.
So, if it takes 30 days for someone to take action after being exposed to the media, and then it takes maybe another 30 days, we'll just say it, to account for those sales, we're looking at a 60-day window of the return on our media investment. So trying to fill those gaps in with, say, the store traffic piece, with understanding, how people are visiting, when they're visiting, how long it's taking to visit, helps us then to continue to refine that modeling and the analysis we're doing to really understand. And that's where it becomes now we can give to leadership an expectation that's a little bit more grounded in the data that we do have, and then constantly trying to iterate and get more realistic, whether it's market testing, where we'll do, a market with media on or a different media mix than another, and start to look at ways that we can pull those levers to, just really decrease that timeline.
This is a great, we talked to a lot of marketing leaders. This is a great example of ideally Matt can just draw a line between the ad campaign spend down to the fulfillment, directly without human intervention. And that's hard to do, but you found another way with a series of step points along the way that is not perfect, but it does start to give you a view into how things are impacted. So kudos to you for just being creative across multiple dimensions. I would love to spend a few minutes to talk about, because the other thing you said, which is near and dear to my heart, which is healthcare has to iterate beyond intent channels, because intent is really great when the intent exists, but there are other jobs that we have as marketers, and you have the job of going and creating demand quickly for a brand new solution for your customer base that needs education. Walk me through a little bit about your demand strategy outside of beyond Google, because I know Google's part of it, but what are the other weapons that you have in that strategy to create awareness for people and educate them, and then hopefully move them eventually to that visit?
Yeah, historically, everyone has just treated our friends at Google as that's the demand driver. Everything else is awareness, everything else is consideration, but Google's got the lock on that because the intention of consumers, all of us, has been, I'm going to go through Google and that's how I'm going to find the answer. And it's still there. It's not going away
For sure.
quickly, but many of the advertising platforms that are available today, many of the places, the spaces where we exist in front of a consumer, have gotten really much better at this ability to bring conversion into their mix. I'm talking about things like connected television, digital audio. These spaces have gotten really good now at building, shaping a media plan around something that's much more action oriented. That's also due to our behavior, right? We search for things in different places. We find those actionable things in different places. People are shopping more on social than they are shopping at store websites. They're a lot of people are using various other places to find information instead of just going straight to a search engine. Obviously, the elephant in the room is the LLMs and all of the various iterations and variations of how people are finding that information nowadays. So for us in those spaces, we do test into and take advantage of the opportunities to build a campaign in a digital audio space, but it's actually geared towards conversion rather than just, blasting out a million impressions and running it that way. And it's helped us to find those places where we can absolutely see the change in those other indicators that we have along the path, whether it's foot traffic, whether it's, even web visits and web activity, just more qualified visits. Granted, you're reaching in the campaigns a much smaller audience, because that's the goal, right? I want to make sure that I'm hitting only the people that I know are going to take action. And these campaigns are designed to do that. And the platforms have gotten quite good at helping us as marketers, as advertisers, to shape those campaigns together. They've brought in the data, they brought in the services, they brought in the tech stack behind the scenes, with whether it's pixeling a site and feeding data back and these kinds of things that were just not options 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. They just weren't there. You turned on television or you ran a spot on a streamer and the early streamer kind of scenarios, and you just hope for the best. But now everybody's gotten on board because we as marketers and advertisers have pushed into this. We have said, look, we like these things. We like streaming. We like video. We like content because it's really engaging for the consumer and the purchaser. But we need to be able to measure it. We need to be able to drive the actions, because just throwing out commercials is not the answer anymore. So they've gotten really good at it. There are other partners that have gotten good at integrating this kind of thing and helping you to use AI, especially to build audiences and construct contextual targeting and all of these fun things based on the volume of data they can consume, has helped quite a bit to take the majority of our media mix, in fact, and pull it a lot further down. Not going to replace all that demand gen stuff that Google's still really good at it, but helping to really pull it much further down and make it a lot more actionable and goal oriented, instead of just pushing awareness every day.
I love that. Yeah, it's one part you mentioned is like, who is my audience? Where is my message going to land the strongest? Is like part one is so important, and there's so many tools to do that today. And then part two is the advancing in technology, where things like CTV and audio aren't just brand awareness. They are things to educate that audience that you can land with and move them to success. And that's where things like Google help that. They help capture that intent. They help like get it across the line. Not singularly, but like LLMs, Google, great experience. Like once you're ready to engage with one of your locations.
For sure.
I love that approach. I guess the question for you is like, this is crystal ball time. I know I hate these questions myself, but I've got to ask it because you're thinking ahead and you're going to be in a different spot in 6 months than you are today. And a year from now, you're going to be in a different spot from that. But like, if we fast forward a year or two from now, what does your fully mature marketing and measurement setup look like for Stellest?
The next phase, I think, especially for a brand like Stellest, to really gain adoption within the consumer space, understanding, but also just this sort of inside feeling about a brand. It needs to have this element of trustworthiness. It needs to have this element of a shared sort of perception among their peers, and this kind of understanding, the way a consumer brand does. So from my perspective and from our team in our organization within the verticals of social and PR and media, we are all thinking towards how can we best leverage and continue to, but maybe expand our work with creators, with influencers, with partnerships and sponsorships, these kind of things, but also do it in a way that is measurable, the way we're trying to measure and activate a digital audio ad that we have evolved to the point where we can do. So that's another kind of pretty emerging place right now, is this creator space. Obviously, everybody knows of influencers and creators, and they're all over the place, but getting your organization to buy into those kinds of things is really tough, because I don't know how many, if they get 30 views on a page or 1 million views on a post, what good is that? That's where this ecosystem and creator space is really, I'm seeing it, in new startups and new platforms coming along every day that help you shop creators and find creators. And then you extend that beyond just a creator or an influencer, but to another brand that you would partner or sponsor with. How are you measuring this? Just, if it's just a logo slap, or is it something bigger and more ingrained in the partnership that has a deeper meaning that resonates, and you can, that trustworthiness or that responsiveness to this brand can then help you get into that family and into the sight line of those parents, so that they can then, of course, take action. But measuring those things, finding the comparisons, because a lot of times you're speaking to folks in, whether it's the rest of your marketing team, whether it's outside into the sales organization, to other departments and other areas, they're not in this necessarily every day like we are. So the words we're saying, they have to put context to them, and their context may be TV, billboards, print media, these kinds of things. And so when you say, well, we're going to have this activation here, or we're going to have this creator build some content for us, and having to pull that together and make sense of it in just a single 30-minute meeting on a slide deck you shared with them, they're going to say, why are we doing that? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So that's the big place, I think, in the next 6 months to a year, is really locking in this element of this creators and influencers in our space, right? Again, in a retail world selling sneakers, I make a post with some celebrity. That post gets 1,000 links over to my store. They buy the shoes. Success, right?
Easy to measure.
Yeah, so simple. I'm jealous, but they in our space, it's because we're identifying creators and influencers and partnerships that help this education story as well as the brand story is critical. But measuring that and making sure that we're seeing the action after the fact is the hard part that we're going to have to overcome next.
You have such a product mindset, which is like, you got to, before you build products, you need to figure out how you're going to actually measure the product adoption and the product benefits. So I love that you're ahead of that. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you doing marketing rounds with me today. I expected to learn a lot from you, and I did on like multiple dimensions, and really appreciate you sharing it with us and our audience.
Thanks, Ray.